Hey there, night dwellers. Welcome back to Nightmare Frequency. Before we descend into tonight's chilling tale, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, get cozy, and prepare yourself for another journey into the unknown.
A dull throb of static filled the cramped recording van parked at the edge of Cranfield Forest, where the early morning mist clung to skeletal trees like ghosts unwilling to let go. Mara Ortiz, a local radio journalist known for chasing unexplained phenomena, adjusted her recorder's gain, fingers trembling. She'd heard the rumor. A drifter's whispered confession, captured by hikers' cameras, spoke of a creature in these woods, a thing that mimicked voices and lured the curious into shadows. Most dismissed it as tasteless campfire lore. But Mara smelled a story, something real and terrible lurking beyond the edge of the light. The forest was silent except for her own breathing. Thick roots snaked under damp leaves, reminding Mara of buried ankles waiting for her to trip. Her partner Rowan watched through the windshield, phone's GPS and flashlight app already drained to 50%. She leaned forward, voice low. "You sure about this? We'll be deep by sundown." Lightning flickered overhead, but the clouds held no rain. Mara swallowed, nodding. "People vanish here, if we catch even a hint." She traced her microphone cable as if the wire could tether her to safety. They followed a narrow path documented in the drifter's shaky footage. The camera had panned across gouged tree trunks and thin trails of crimson sap. Now, between the pines, Mara spotted similar scars, fresh and oozing. Rowan's jaw tightened. Sap or blood? Without waiting for her answer, he flicked the flashlight into the gloaming. The beam revealed dark rivulets winding down bark like finger trails. Mara clicked record, voice hushed. "These marks, they're not animal scratches. Too deliberate." A sudden crack sounded behind them. They spun. The beam caught a figure retreating among trees, a hunched shape that didn't belong. Rowan cursed and lunged after it. Mara hesitated, mind screaming to run back to the van, but her curiosity pushed her forward. "Rowan, wait!" she called. He paused, flashlight cutting a path through the gloom, revealing pale, gaunt cheeks and hollow eyes that reflected the beam. He raised his hand, a silent come-hither gesture. Mara stepped closer, pulse racing. The drifter's voice played in her head. "It talks like them." Yet when the figure opened its mouth, a soft, familiar tone emerged. "Help me." The words matched Rowan's voice precisely, trembling with panic as if spoken by her colleague. Mara froze. "Rowan," she whispered. The figure tilted its head, exposing teeth too uniform, too clean. The smile stretched wrong. "Come deeper," it repeated, voice now a perfect mimicry of Rowan's. Its chest rose, not with breath, but with unnatural rhythm. Mara's skin prickled. She lunged forward and yanked Rowan by the collar, dragging him back. He stumbled, glare hardening. "That wasn't me," he spat, eyes wild. The imposter let out a high, warbling laugh that shattered the hush. In a blur, two shapes darted between trees, Rowan's doppelganger and another that matched Mara's silhouette almost exactly. Fear hit her like stone. The thing could become anyone. She fumbled for her recorder, hoping to capture its voice, to somehow prove what she'd seen. Without warning, the imposters collided and merged, leaving an oozing mass of flesh that slithered across the leaves. The ground beneath it pulsed as if breathing. Mara scrambled backward, heart hammering. Rowan steadied her shoulder. "In the van," he hissed. They bolted along the trail, branches whipping at their faces. Something followed, its skittering footsteps crisp against the forest floor. The metal click of talons or claws lashed their heels. They slammed the van door, and Rowan turned the key. The engine sputtered. Mara pounded the dashboard. "Come on!" The creature's face appeared at the windshield, pressed flat, eyes wide and mocking. Rowan revved the engine. Tires spun, spraying mud as they tore onto the forest road. In his rearview mirror, the thing's outline flickered like a living shadow, then vanished in a poof of mist. At a lonely gas station 10 miles away, the van idled under a flickering sign. Mara sank into the passenger seat, trembling. Rowan scrolled through his phone, eyes widening. Social media buzzed. Hikers in Cranfield Forest had posted footage of a pale creature mimicking their friends' voices. One video showed a distorted face screaming for help, then shifting into something else before the camera dropped. The comments speculated, joked, floated theories. None captured what Mara and Rowan had endured. Back in the van, static crackled from Mara's recorder. She pressed play. At first, only wind and her own voice. Then, unmistakably, Rowan's tone. Mara, we need to go deeper. The recorder had captured the lure. Her own terrified gasp followed. She paused the playback, shaking. Rowan stared at her, face ghostly in the dashboard lights. They can get inside cameras, phones, he said quietly. Inside everything we record. Mara's fingers flew across the controls, erasing the clip. We can't let this get out. Over the next week, crews poured into the forest. Official statements blamed pranksters. Search parties found no bodies, no monsters. The gouged trees were declared animal activity. Mara's editors pressured her for a follow-up story. Hard facts, not ghost tales. Rowan refused to talk on air. Every time Mara began to speak, her voice trembled. Every time Rowan joined her off-air, his eyes darted to every shadow. Then came the call. Late one evening, Mara's phone buzzed, an unknown number. A soft whisper. Mara, help me. Her blood ran cold. She recognized the voice, Rowan's, begging. The line went dead. She dialed him back. It rang endlessly. No voicemail. Panic flared. Rowan would never disable voicemail. At dawn, she drove to his apartment. The door was ajar. Inside, the lights flickered. The hallway rug lay folded in the center of the floor, soaked in dark stains. Mara's stomach clenched. She called his name. No answer. The bedroom door stood open, curtains billowing though the window was closed. On the bed lay his recorder, blinking play in red. She pressed the button. Static. Then her own voice. Rowan, wait. Followed by bone-chilling laughter. The laughter warped into her tone, mocking. A new voice whispered, Mara, I'm here now. The recorder cut to silence. She stepped forward, heart hammering. The curtains snapped aside, a figure stood in the window frame, outlines soft, features blurred. Even from 20 feet, Mara could see those mismatched teeth, the unnatural smile. She clutched the recorder, ready to run, but curiosity rooted her in place. The creature tilted its head as if studying her. Then it spoke in multiple voices at once. Rowan's voice pleading, her own voice panicked, and a dozen others layered under. The effect was grotesque, like tuning through dead channels on a radio, voices warping in and out of focus. Mara edged back. The figure slid from the sill without a sound and moved toward her, arms extended as if reaching for a hug. It's lonely, it crooned in Rowan's voice. Come play. She turned, sprinted toward the door. Binoculars, camera, recorder, everything lay abandoned. She flung herself into the hallway, catching sight of her reflection in a cracked mirror. Eyes wide, face pale. A scrape of claws behind her. She bolted again, stumbling through the apartment. Doors slammed as she passed. Lights popped on and off. Each room she cleared led to another corridor identical to the last. The wallpaper stripes aligned into endless repetitions. It felt like the apartment itself had twisted into a maze. In the chaos, she remembered the drifter's footage. He'd said the thing trapped him in a loop of corridors, always just steps from freedom but never reaching it. At the end, his camera showed nothing but corridor after corridor, the lens scratched and smeared. She risked a glance at the viewfinder on her recorder. The hallway ahead shimmered, growing longer. Fear surged as realization struck. The creature bent space itself. Summoning courage, Mara pressed record and spoke aloud. If you want me to play, you have to listen to me. The corridor behind her stilled. The lights steadied. The corridor ahead ceased warping. She turned slowly, facing an empty hall. No creature. No loop. Just doors. Quiet. Her breath came in ripping sobs. She fled outside under the pale sky and realized she still held the recorder. She pressed play. Only her voice, strong and steady, echoing back. No mimicry. No laughter. Mara drove miles away without stopping, past fields and towns until she reached the radio station. The midday show had started. She burst into the studio, startling the host. I have to go on, she said. She placed the recorder on the desk, hands still shaking. People need to hear this. The host eyed her warily. We need proof, or we can lose our license. Mara tapped the recorder. Watch. The screen flickered, then displayed a single message in jagged text. Let me in. The host leaned closer. Silence filled the control room as static hissed through the speakers. Then a voice slipped through, a perfect copy of the host's own voice. You know me, right? The host paled and leaned back. Mara swallowed. Now they know the truth. She turned to the console, flipping switches. We'll broadcast it all. The world should know. Outside, the forest at Cranfield lay silent under a sun that betrayed nothing. Late that night, listeners called in with their own experiences. Footsteps chasing them down empty hallways, cries that sounded like loved ones, devices picking up whispered pleas in pure darkness. The station aired stories one after another until dawn broke. Mara stood alone on the air, voice calm. If you hear something calling your name, remember, it's not you. A final scratch leaked through the mic. Then clarity. Rowan's voice, soft and sweet. Mara, I'm here now. Mara paused. Good night, she whispered, and reached to mute the mic. But before she could, the voice whispered again, closer this time. Come deeper. The lights in the studio flickered. Outside, the air grew cold, and something pressed against the glass, its many eyes shining.
Story number 2.
The night the lights went out in Renford Asylum, Mara Bishop was already deep inside its crumbling corridors, camera rolling. She'd come alone, no partner, no crew, drawn by whispers of patients who vanished without a trace, their screams still echoing off damp stone walls. The asylum's heavy iron gates had groaned shut behind her, sealing her in as the last street lamp in the courtyard blinked off. She clicked on her headlamp. Its beam carved a narrow tunnel of pale light through the darkness. Along the peeling walls, faded murals of dancing children warped in the flicker. A distant drip, drip, drip. Water or something else? Mara kept the camera between her and the shadows, heart thudding as if it might leap from her chest. She whispered into the mic, "This is Mara Bishop, Renford Asylum, 30 years abandoned. They say it still listens." Her footsteps echoed. Room after room lay empty. Broken beds, rusted syringes, yellowed records strewn on the floor. Then she found the ward where the patients slept, a long hall lined with small cells, each iron door hanging open. At the far end, a single light glowed. The old nurse's station, its bulb sputtering like a dying eye. She approached, camera zooming on a leather-bound ledger. The names inside stopped abruptly one night in 1957. Next to each name, a note, "Went home." But none of them lived past that date. Mara's throat tightened, a soft shuffle behind her. She spun. The hallway was empty. The door to the next cell stood ajar. Inside, scrawled in charcoal on the walls, "I'm still here." She exhaled, voice trembling. "Who's there?" Only silence responded. Mara pressed forward toward the locked operating theater. They said Dr. Renford performed unauthorized experiments here, unspeakable acts meant to cure madness. She found the latch and forced the door. The lamp inside had fallen, its shade shattered. On the operating table lay a stack of patient files, each marked disposition unknown. Beneath them, a fresh, bloody handprint. She swallowed. Her own fingers left bloodless prints on the camera. A soft thump against the far wall made her jump. The table's leather straps dragged across the tiles as if pulled by invisible hands. Mara backed away, bumping her head on an IV stand. The camera slipped from her grip and clattered on the floor, lens pointed at the ceiling. She scrabbled to pick it up, dread pooling in her belly. It clicked on, displaying what it had recorded. The ceiling tiles bubbled as if something pressed up from above. A low, guttural moan crept through the speakers. Mara froze, then one tile shifted. A pale hand emerged, fingers long and slender. It scraped along the plaster before pulling itself through, revealing a face, gaunt, eyes rimmed in black, lips curled back in a rictus grin. Mara stumbled back, camera clattering into her other hand. The thing crawled downward, ash falling from its hair in little clouds. Its eyes met hers. "You looked," it rasped, voice like wind through dead branches. "You saw." She fumbled for her recorder, but it slipped to the floor again. The creature skittered off the table and lunged. Mara screamed, scrambling toward the door, but it slammed shut with a clang. Darkness swallowed her. Her lamp died. Total blackness. Her breaths came fast. Then a whisper, directly in her ear. "Don't run." The words were her own voice. She shivered, turning, but no one was there. Then a chorus. Dozens of voices, all begging, all crying, echoing around her. "Help me. Don't leave me. Please." Mara fumbled for her phone, flicked on its light. The beam danced across dozens of figures standing beyond the operating table, patients dressed in filthy hospital gowns, faces gaunt, eyes hollow. Their mouths moved soundlessly. Their arms reached out. She backed away until her shoulder hit the cold wall. The figures advanced, not making a sound, but moving with dreadful deliberation. One reached a withered hand toward her throat. Panic spiked. She kicked out, shattering a glass panel in the door. Glass shards tinkled across the floor. She seized the panel, jammed it into the lock, and wrenched the door open. A figure lunged, tangled in her coat as she stumbled through. She slammed the door, collaring it with her shoulder. The corridor light blinked back on in a sickly green glow. She ran. Behind her, the asylum seemed to breathe, the walls pulsing, the floors sighing. Doors opened and closed, footsteps chased her down every hallway. She sprinted past wards, past the recreation room where rusty swings still swayed, past the chapel where hymn books lay scattered. Each time she dared to look over her shoulder, more figures crowded the corridors, faces twisted in silent anguish. She burst through the main doors into the courtyard. Moonlight cut through the mist, but the gates were shut tight. She pounded on the iron bars. "Let me out!" Her voice cracked. A soft chuckle drifted from the darkness near the back wall. She swung around. A single patient stood there, tall, thin, his gown stained. He lifted a finger to his lips. "Hush," he whispered, voice echoing her own. "They'll hear you." Mara slid down to the ground, tears streaming. The patient's grin widened, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. The mist coalesced around him, forming dozens more. They pressed close, cold and unrelenting. She fumbled her phone, hands slick with sweat, snapping a final photo. Flash lit the courtyard in a harsh burst. The patients frozen, faces contorted, each more horrifying than the last. As the light faded, they closed in. Mara snapped the shutter again, and the photo showed only empty mist. Behind her, a chorus rose, her own voice crying, pleading, laughing. She turned as the figures lunged, and the asylum's iron gates swung open on their own accord. The last thing her camera recorded was her scream, cut short.
Story number 3.
A tremor of unease ran through the air as the first tour group stepped into the hushed cathedral of Kelswood Cemetery. The rising moon painted the ancient headstones in sharp relief, and the wind carried a whisper that sounded just almost, like someone calling your name. Lydia Shaw waited at the iron gate, clutching her flashlight. She'd volunteered to guide these night tours for extra cash, and the dark helped her forget the emptiness that had settled in her since her brother's disappearance. She told herself this was routine, but even she felt the weight in the stones, the sense that something watched from the shadows. "Good evening, everyone," Lydia began, voice steady. She led them past leaning crypts, through archways carved with angels half erased by time. Her light caught on a weathered plaque at the far edge, a mass grave from the 1849 famine, souls buried in haste. The group shivered, snapping photos. Lydia cleared her throat. "Here lie the nameless. It is said their spirits never rest." She paused, searching for that practiced chill. A sudden clatter echoed from behind a mausoleum. Heads whipped around, flashlights swung wildly. Lydia smiled faintly. "Just a loose slab. Happens all the time." She guided them toward the old chapel, its doors sealed, once a holding vault for the restless before burial. Legend said the vault's lock was cast in iron from church bells melted down by villagers who feared its darkness. Tonight, someone had pried the lock open. The chapel door stood cracked. Frost slipped from the hinges as it creaked. A young man in the front row hopped backward. "Shouldn't that be locked?" he muttered. Lydia kept her tone light. "Tourists get curious." She stepped forward, gently pushing the door until it hardly resisted. Inside, the air tasted of damp stone and decay. Her flashlight cut a path across empty pews, leading to a pulpit carved with grieving faces. But something else crouched beneath the altar, a bundle of tattered coats, wet with earth. One of the women gasped. "What is that?" Lydia forced calm. "Probably some drifters' camp." Before she could finish, a figure crawled from the pile. A girl, no older than 12, hair matted and eyes too bright, staring. Her dress was threadbare, her skin smudged with dirt and something darker. Lydia's heart seized. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" The girl's lips peeled back in a grin. "I'm fine," she whispered, voice high and hollow. "Will you help me find them?" A cold breeze stirred the candles mounted along the walls, and though none had burned in years. Flames flickered to life, revealing a second child, this one a boy, equally ragged, sliding from the opposite wall. Gasps filled the chapel. Lydia swallowed. "Children shouldn't be here," she said. "Where are your parents?" The boy's laugh echoed unnaturally off the stone. "We lost them." He lifted a pale hand. "Will you help us look?" Behind Lydia, footsteps approached. The tour group had followed her in, eyes wide. A woman sobbed. Lydia turned to shoo them out, but the door latched with a decisive click. Every headlight inside snapped off at once. Darkness pressed in. Lydia's breath caught in her throat. She flicked her torch, dead. Panic flared as dozens of tiny feet scuttled on stone around her. She spotted the children at the altar, faces empty. "Come," the girl whispered. She took Lydia's hand, surprisingly cold. "We'll find them." The boy beckoned to the pews. "Down here." They led Lydia into a narrow crawl space hidden beneath floorboards. The air was thick, pulsing. As Lydia squeezed through, she felt the rough stone press against her cheek and smelled the sour tang of fear. Behind her, the floor snapped shut. The crawlspace opened onto a cavern beneath the cemetery, rows of alcoves carved into living rock, each holding a small coffin. Some lay open, empty, others sealed. Candlelight glowed from dripping sconces. The children led her to the furthest alcove, where a coffin's lid sat raised on cracked hinges. They paused. Lydia's heart pounded as she shone her light inside, a hollow shell coated in dust. Under her breath, she whispered, "Who's in there?" The girl tilted her head. "No one." She slid aside and stepped into the alcove. Instantly, a deafening chorus of cries exploded through the chamber. Voices screaming in grief, anger, terror. Lydia clamped her hands over her ears. The boy howled in delight, eyes gleaming. A coffin lid slammed across Lydia's shoulders. She fell back, breath knocked out. Darkness bit at her mind. The lanterns flickered, revealing dozens of coffin lids slamming shut, one after another, sealing her in. She pounded the rock walls, this calling for help, but only echoes answered. Somewhere above, footsteps sounded. A distant voice shouted, "Lydia! Lydia!" She clawed at the coffin lid, gasping for breath. It wouldn't budge. The crying voices crescendoed into a shriek. So many souls trapped, hungry for escape. Lydia's panicked eye caught movement in the darkness. The girl and boy perched on the edge of her coffin, grinning. "Thank you for helping," they whispered in unison. Their forms shimmered, edges blurring into mist. Then the lid pressed down harder. Lydia screamed as it snapped shut. Darkness closed in. Her hand brushed the latch, frozen metal, shaped like a bell, but she couldn't reach it. The echoes faded, replaced by a new, singular sound. Her own breaths, ragged and desperate. Above ground, the last tour member leapt against the sealed chapel door, screaming Lydia's name. No answer came. The chapel lay silent once more, as if never disturbed. Beyond its walls, the cemetery grew still under the moon, and a faint voice drifted upward. "Will you help me find them?"
Story number 4.
The first thing Leon noticed about their new apartment was the smell, like damp wool and something fouled buried under water. She shrugged it off as old pipes settling and set her keys on the narrow console table in the vestibule. Her roommate, Paul, would be home late again. Third shift at the hospital. The building's elevator groaned on each floor, and the fluorescent light in the hallway buzzed so violently Leanne half expected it to explode. That night, she unpacked boxes in the kitchen while a kettle hissed on the stove. Empty cartons lay like skeletons across the linoleum. She flipped through a stack of old mail left by the previous tenant. Bills, a library notice, and one ominous envelope, unmarked, yellowed at the edges. Curious, she opened it. Inside, a single Polaroid of the apartment's living room, taken from the exact spot where Leon now stood. But in the photo, the couch was overturned, and a dark shape crouched in the corner, face indistinct. On the back, scrawled in careful script, "She watches." Leon's breath caught. The hair on her arms prickled. She told herself someone had played a prank, but her throat tightened. She stashed the photo in her pocket and poured water into the kettle. As she waited, she felt a flicker of movement behind her. She spun, but the narrow doorway framed only the empty hallway, light flickering. "Hello?" she called. The kettle whistled shrilly. She jumped, yanked off the lid, and slammed the flame down. Steam blurred her vision as she poured water into her mug. She shook her head. Too much stress starting a new job, too much late-night solitude. Later, curled on the couch with coffee and a book, Leon noticed the reflection in the window, a figure standing in the hallway behind her. Tall, thin, face blurred by distance. She dropped her mug. It shattered on the tile like steam curling upward like pale fingers. Her heart thundered. "Paul?" she called, voice rigid. No answer. The hallway light flickered its final gasp and went out, leaving only the street glow through the glass. She pressed against the window, peering into the black corridor. No one there. A wet drip echoed somewhere deep in the walls. Leon swallowed. She fumbled her phone and dialed Paul. The phone rang and rang. Finally went to voicemail. She texted, "Hey, are you going to be home soon? Weird stuff happening." No reply. Panic wrapped her chest in ice. She rushed to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, anything, and crept toward the hallway. Her steps were careful on the cold floor. The door to the lone bathroom lay ajar, the light bulb shattered months ago. Inside, the mirror above the sink reflected her pale face. Then behind her, the silhouette of a woman, hair hanging limp in straight black strands, head tilted at an impossible angle. Leon forced herself to turn. The bathroom was empty. She blinked, chest heaving. A soft scraping sounded from the vent above the mirror. Scritch! Scritch! Something dragging itself along the metal grill. She backed out, tripping over her shoeboxes, falling hard. The knife clattered away. She scrambled to her feet and darted down the hallway, only to find the front door wide open, the chilly air rushing in. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, on the carpeted stairs beyond the rail. She froze, then bolted back toward the kitchen phone. Her fingers trembled as she dialed 911. A soft voice, mechanical, "Please enter your emergency." But the line went dead. The meter clicked off. She cradled the receiver, tears stinging. Through the living room window, she saw a light on in the apartment across the hall, empty for months, according to the landlord. The electricity was off, yet the window glowed. Leanne crossed the room, drawn by a terrible curiosity. The photo flashed through her mind. Someone watching. At the neighbor's door, she knocked. The buzzing of the hallway light stuttered. She knocked again. Nothing. She reached for the knob, cold metal. She turned it and pushed. Inside, the living room was pristine, as if newly painted. No dust, no boxes. A couch faced her, and in that corner, slumped as though asleep against the wall, was a woman in a faded blouse. Leanne's throat closed. She whispered, "Hello?" No movement. She edged forward, heart pounding, and the figure lifted its head. Black hair fell like a curtain across an empty skull, eyes hollow pits. Its lips peeled away to reveal too many teeth. The moment it looked up, the hallway light exploded, plunging Leon into a thunderous blackout. The figure let out a sound like grinding gears. Leon stumbled back, slammed the door, and fled into her apartment. She locked the deadbolt, slid the chain across, and sank against it, sobbing. The whisper came from the next room, quiet as the hiss of steam. "You promised to help me watch." She darted to the boxes where the Polaroid lay, yanked it out, and the image had changed. Now it showed her slumped on the couch, lifeless, staring out, with that blurred shape looming behind. The words on the back, newly scrawled, "You stay." A light tapped against her bedroom window. She screamed, backing away, knife in trembling hand. The tapping continued. Tap, 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 growing louder, coming down the glass, until the last pane shattered inward. Leanne's scream echoed once, then faded into a strangled silence.
Story number 5.
A week after the estate sale, the mirror arrived. It was taller than Lena by half a head, an ornate gilt frame etched with curling ivy and tiny faces you only saw when the light hit them just right. Marcus, her father, hefted it through the front door and leaned it against the hallway wall. "Perfect for the foyer," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Lena watched its surface, already spotting a smeared handprint that hadn't been hers. That night, the mirror glowed. Not with light, but with a dull luminance that pulsed, as if something inside its glass were breathing. Lena crept from her bedroom, slippers soundless on the rug. She raised a finger to her lips and stepped before the mirror. The reflection showed her pale face, hair messily braided, just as she was, but behind her, a little girl in a faded white dress hovered, eyes empty. Lena spun. Nothing. When she turned back, her reflection had gone still. The girl remained, lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. "Are you real?" Lena whispered. The girl's head tilted, brushing stray curls from her forehead. She mouthed, "Help me," though no sound came. Lena stretched out a hand, finger grazing cold glass. The surface rippled under her touch, like water. At breakfast, Lena startled Marcus by darting elbows deep into his eggs. "Why is there a kid in the mirror last night?" she demanded. He laughed. "You and your stories." He flicked a spot of mustard from his shirt, oblivious. That afternoon, Lena's mother found her in the hallway. "Sweetheart, stay out of that mirror. It's delicate." When Lena tried to argue, her mother's eyes widened. "Just don't, okay?" But the mirror called to her. That evening, Lena tiptoed down the hall again. The creature waited, pressed flat against the glass. This time it spoke in a cracked rasp. "Open it." Lena frowned. "Open what?" The girl pointed at the frame, where ivy leaves converged into a small latch. Lena's heart hammered. She didn't remember any latch, but under her fingers it clicked. A panel swung inward, revealing a dark hollow. A faint warmth seeped out, along with the smell of wet earth. The girl's voice hissed, "Inside, please." Lena hesitated, her pulse racing. Reality felt thin. Behind her, the hall lights sputtered out. Lena yanked at the latch. The panel refused to close. The little girl's pale hand slipped through the opening. Lena caught it. Her skin, though cold, pulsed like living flesh. Before she could pull away, the world tilted. She stumbled forward and found herself in a long corridor lined with arched windows. Moonlight streamed in, but every pane showed not stars but flickering images. Lena sleeping, Lena at school, Lena playing. And in each reflection, the little girl stood behind her, ever grinning. Lena spun to escape, but the corridor stretched on impossibly, doors spiraling off into darkness. A voice called her name, soft, urgent. Lena. She recognized it as her mother's, but gutted, as if someone had whispered her through a tin can. "Mama," she cried, pounding on the nearest door. It swung open into a nursery, walls painted with pastel animals. Across the crib, the little girl sat, legs dangling. "Come closer," she said. "It's warm in here." Lena shook her head. No. She ran back into the hall, but each window now showed only her own face, pale and terrified. Then the girl appeared at the far end of the corridor. "Stay with me," she begged. "They forgot me." Lena's throat went dry. "Who?" The girl's eyes glistened. "Everyone." They all looked away. She took Lena's hand. Lena felt an irresistible tug, like gravity had reversed. The hallway vaulted downward, and she tumbled forward. She hit the floor hard, breath knocked out. Blinking, she found herself crouched on the carpet in her foyer. Mirror intact, the latch swinging open. The little girl knelt beside the frame, head cocked. Lena staggered back. "Go away," she shouted. The girl's laughter tinkled like broken wind chimes. "But I'm here now." Marcus's voice boomed from the stairs. "Lena? Everything okay?" Lena lunged at the mirror and slammed the latch shut. The panel fit tight, as if it had never opened. She bolted to her room and locked the door, crumpling to the floor. In her panic, she forgot the mirror. Hours later, her mother's gentle knock pulled her out of fevered sleep. "Honey, we need to talk." In the hallway, the air felt heavy. The mirror stood darker than before, its surface oily under the dim light. Lena followed her mother into the living room. "She tried to crawl through that mirror," her mother said, voice trembling. Marcus hovered behind her, face ashen. "The latch was open when I walked by," he added. Lena's stomach churned. "Where is she?" Lena whispered. Her mother pointed. Lena squeezed her eyes shut. When she opened them, the mirror showed only her own reflection. No little girl. The ivy faces in the frame seemed to leer, as if satisfied. Marcus reached out and wiped a finger across the glass. A single smear appeared. Tiny handprint, palm pressed flat. Beneath it, scrawled in gleaming white. "Thank you for letting me in." Lena backed away, heart pounding. She realized with a sickening thrill that she couldn't remember whether she'd ever seen the latch before, or whether the girl had been waiting all along for someone to find it.
Story number 6.
Carlos tapped the wheel to keep himself awake as he rolled through the empty side streets at 2:17 a.m. His rideshare app pinged, a new request 2 blocks ahead. The address blinked unknown, no name displayed. He sucked in a breath. Most late-night requests were a headache, then tapped accept. He turned onto Laurel Avenue, headlights cutting through drifting fog. At the curb stood a woman in a dark coat, face hidden under a hood. Her posture was stiff. Carlos slowed, rolled down his window. "You're Laurel?" he asked softly. She lifted her head. Pale skin, dark circles under eyes. "Yes," she said, voice low. She slid into the back seat without buckling. "North on Pine, please." Carlos flipped on the internal camera, mandatory for his safety, but the screen glitched and went black. He frowned, tapped the monitor. The app rebooted. He ducked his head to reset it. When he looked up, the backseat was empty. He froze, fingers tightening on the wheel. The doors were locked. He glanced in the mirror. No one. His heart thundered. "Ma'am?" He twisted around, but saw only his reflection in the fogged windows. He flipped the camera back on. Clear image returned, the empty back seat. No hood, no figure. He exhaled, trying to steady his breath. "Sorry," he muttered, glancing ahead. Laurel's quiet voice came from the backseat speaker. "You shouldn't have looked." Carlos jerked forward. The dash speaker crackled, though his Bluetooth was off. He slammed on the brakes. The wheels skidded. A low horn blared from behind. He straightened the car. "Lady, if this is a prank..." "This isn't a prank," she said. Her voice was too calm. He turned his head again. At the edge of his vision, a shape flickered in the back seat. A woman hunched over, head hanging. He yanked his head back. Nothing. Carlos's phone buzzed with a navigation update. "Turn left onto Pine." The map showed Laurel's destination as Oakhurst Motel, 5 miles away. He exhaled. Okay, Oakhurst Motel, Pine's next left. He pulled onto Pine. Streetlights sputtered overhead, casting a jaundiced glow. Thick houses loomed. At the motel entrance, the neon sign read, "No vacancy." A single car sat under the porch. Laurel's silhouette stood just outside the tinted glass. He parked. "Here we are." She opened the door without looking at him. Carlos hesitated as she passed, unable to see her face, the hood still hiding her features. He leaned in. "Fare's $12.45, he said. His voice shook. She clenched her fists. "Here." A crumpled bill landed on the console. Carlos grabbed his phone and scanned the app. It showed $0. He frowned. "I can't keep what you didn't pay," he said. She closed the door. Carlos waited, heart pounding, then reached back and touched the hood of the seat. His fingers brushed something cold and wet. He recoiled as a low moan came through the speaker. The app pinged again. A notification slid in. "You have a missed ride, 214 Laurel Avenue." He stared, but he'd just come from there. He tapped the notification. Laurel Johnson, trip completed. The date below read 3 days ago. Carlos's throat seized. He reached for his dash camera, replayed the recording. The first half showed him picking her up, then static, then him sitting alone in the car, hands shaking on the wheel. No passenger, no hood. Then the final seconds, a blurred figure pressing her face to the window, mouth agape in a silent scream. He gasped and yanked at the door handle. It was locked. In panic, he fumbled for the app's lock doors toggle and hit it. The doors unlocked. He burst out of the car, breathing freezing puffs into the fog. The motel air smelled of damp carpet and bleach. He ran to the office door under the neon sign. The clerk's window was dark. He rattled the handle. Inside, the room was empty, dusty, as though no one had worked there in years. Behind the counter, a bulletin board held yellowed clippings. One headline read, "Local woman found dead in motel room." Beneath it, a photo of a familiar face, Laurel Johnson, dead for 2 years, her body discovered upstairs in room 4. Carlos felt bile rise. He stumbled back out into the parking lot. A car door slammed. He spun around. Under the porch light, Laurel's figure stood in a faded robe, heart-stoppingly identical to the woman he just dropped off. She lifted her head, revealing blank, unseeing eyes. Her mouth opened. "You didn't look away," she whispered, voice hollow as wind through a tomb. He backed away, stumbling, and tripped over his own feet. The fog thickened. When he turned back, she was gone. But he heard her voice behind him echoing, "Find me again." Carlos scrambled back to his car, slammed into the driver's side, locked the door, started the engine. The rearview mirror showed nothing but empty seats. On the passenger seat lay a single item, a motel key tag, numbered 4, the edges rusted. He slid it into his pocket, trembling. On the dash camera screen, the static flickered, and for a split second, Laurel's pale face filled the lens, her mouth open in that silent scream. He knew tomorrow he'd see her again, on the app, at the same spot, waiting for another ride.
Story number 7.
The subway car shuddered as it slowed into the abandoned lower tunnel, a stretch of track long decommissioned after a roof collapse decades ago. Elena pressed her forehead against the cold window glass, watching the handful of passengers file off onto the cracked platform. She stayed seated, heart pounding. This wasn't part of the tourist route. She'd sneaked past the guard at the old turnstile to get here, determined to catch the last train out. The carriage lights flickered. A low groan echoed through the steel ribs above. Elena exhaled, trying to calm herself. She checked her phone. No signal. The door indicator read, "Next stop, Ashburn Lower." She frowned. The official line skipped this station entirely. A woman in a threadbare coat sat opposite her. Pale eyes fixed on Elena's reflection, the woman offered a slow nod. Elena's breath caught. The woman's lips never moved, but on the glass her reflection mouthed a single word, "Run." Before Elena could react, the lights winked out. Darkness pressed in, broken only by the occasional red glow of the emergency exit signs. The train lurched as if it had derailed, jolting Elena against the seat. The overhead speaker crackled to life with a voice that was too familiar, her own voice, calm and taunting. "Why do you always run away?" She scrambled up, heart hammering, and lunged for the emergency lever. When she yanked it down, the train to a screeching halt. Doors hissed open onto a platform bathed in garish crimson light. The woman had vanished. Elena bolted onto the platform. The walls were tiled in grime, the ceiling low and sagging. Puddles of oily water reflected the light in unnatural patterns like eyes watching. Her footsteps echoed. She followed the red lights toward an exit sign flickering way out. Halfway down the corridor, she saw movement. Footprints in the water, heading deeper into the darkness, even though no one else had stepped off the train. She swallowed and pressed forward, phone's flashlight buzzing on, revealing handrails bent inward, gouged by something heavy. A distorted echo bounced off the walls, a child's laughter, high and hollow. Elena's throat closed. She sprinted, vision tunneled on the exit sign. The tiles underfoot gave way to metal grating, then to bare earth, and finally she burst into an open shaft, an old ventilation shaft that led up into the streets above. She scrambled up the rungs, gasping. At the top, she pushed through a rusted hatch into an alley behind a row of shuttered storefronts. Moonlight spilled over crates and dumpsters. She staggered out, lungs burning. She dared to look back. The hatch lay open, and from the darkness beneath came the sound of scraping metal, then the train's horn, a long, mournful wail that shouldn't sound above ground. Elena pivoted and fled down the alley. Her phone buzzed to life. A text message. "Welcome home, Alina." Her blood froze. She spun, eyes scanning the dim street. Behind her, in the shadow of a doorway, the woman in the threadbare coat stood watching, head tilted. Elena found her voice. "Who?" The woman raised a hand, fingers extended unnaturally long. "You ran," she whispered in Elena's voice. "You always run." Elena's legs buckled. The woman's reflection shimmered in a puddle at her feet, 100 twisted faces grinning up at her. Elena screamed, stumbling backward into the street, directly into the path of an oncoming car. A horn blared. Headlights blinded her. Then nothing but darkness and the scraping echo of metal on metal. When Elena came to, she lay on the platform again. The lights were steady. The train doors slid open. Passengers streamed out, chatting about delays. Elena sat up, blood trickling down her temple. She looked down at her hands, clenched on the emergency lever. Behind her, the woman in the coat stepped off the train. No one else seemed to see her. The woman reached out and tapped Elena's shoulder. Elena froze, trembling. The woman's lips curved into a smile that was all too familiar. "Welcome home."
Story number 8.
The wind tore at the windows of the old weatherboard cottage as Dr. Alex Renner steadied his flashlight against the gathering dusk. He'd come to Greyhaven to study the harbor's humpback population, but already something felt off. The ocean's pulse was too slow, the gulls too silent. Locals spoke in hushed tones of the abandoned lighthouse at the cliff's edge. Dark for decades, ever since Keeper Hammond disappeared one stormy night. On his first evening, Alex unpacked his equipment and tuned the shortwave radio in the kitchen. Crackle, static, a faint voice wafted through. "Warning, stay away." The signal snapped out. He frowned and jotted a note. "Interference? Foolish prank?" He shrugged it off, chalking it up to the region's magnetic storms, then fell into fitful sleep. Before dawn, the wireless chirped again. He snatched the handset. "Hello?" Nothing but a low hum. He adjusted the dial. This time, a child's voice whispered, "Hide," and the line went dead. A cold chill ran down his spine. He peered through the kitchen window. Dawn was still an hour away, but a dim glow pulsed atop the cliff, like a lighthouse beacon. He grabbed his coat and hurried into the gale. The path to the cliff was slick with seaweed and shale. The wind roared in his ears as he climbed the jagged trail. At the cliff's summit stood the lighthouse, still and shuttered, its red lantern room dark, until Alex pressed his face to the glass and saw, unmistakably, a single candle flickering inside. Heart hammering, he tried the rusted door. Locked. He circled the tower, finding a narrow service hatch at the back. It yielded with a groan. Inside, a spiral staircase wound upward. He rose cautiously, shining his beam on peeling paint and decades of dust. At each landing, he heard a distant drip and a lullaby, sung in a voice disturbingly off-key. When he reached the lantern room, the glass panes were cracked, but on the floor lay a battered music box, its lid open. The tiny ballerina twirled while the wind twisted the tune into a warped waltz. Alex lifted the box. The faint echo of children's laughter rang through the walls. He spun around. In the corner, a small figure hunched by the windowsill, barefoot, wearing a yellow raincoat. The girl tilted her head, hair plastered to her face by rain. "Don't let him see you," she whispered, voice hollow. "He watches from below." Who's watching?" Alex asked, voice shaking. She held out a pale hand. "Follow me." Without waiting for his answer, she slid down a trapdoor hidden beneath the floorboards. Alex hesitated. Then, compelled by equal parts dread and curiosity, he eased the trapdoor open. A ladder descended into darkness. He climbed down into a chamber carved from living stone, walls slick with salt spray. A single lantern hung from a hook, throwing dancing shadows over rusted chains and broken crates. The lullaby's final notes echoed somewhere above. The girl vanished. Alex's flashlight revealed etchings on the walls, crude drawings of ships, storm clouds, and figures with empty eyes. Beneath each, a name scratched in spidery letters: Hammond, Sullivan, Reyes, and at the bottom, his own name, Renner, etched under the date that hadn't yet arrived. His breath froze. He flicked the light toward the center of the chamber. There, shackled to an iron ring driven into the stone, was a weathered lantern, its red glass cracked, steel ribs grooved with deep scratches. From within came a soft glow. Then a low rumble rolled through the cave as the trapdoor slammed shut above him. Alex yanked at the chains, but they held fast. The lantern flared bright, and the girl's voice whispered from inside, "He's here." The lantern exploded into flame, and Alex recoiled, shielding his eyes. When he dared to look again, the chamber was empty. No lantern, no chains, no ladder. Just rough stone walls closing in. A distant drip, then a deep, wet clatter like iron against rock. He raced along the tunnel, branches of passage twisting in every direction. Behind him, the clattering followed, always just out of sight. His flashlight flickered. He heard that lullaby again, slowed to a crawl, as if the gear teeth inside the music box had enlarged. He burst into a cavern by a hidden cove, waves lapping at a rocky shore. Moonlight glimmered on tide pools. Relief washed over him, until the tide pools rippled with dozens of pale faces, mouths wide in silent screams. He stumbled backward onto the beach as shapes rose from the water. Figures in soaked oilskins, eyes black hollows, mouths gaping. The drowned men and women shuffled closer, hands outstretched. He darted between them, lungs burning, and spotted the girl standing on a boulder at the cavern's edge. She clutched the battered music box, now silent. She called softly, "Look." Alex raised his head to the cavern's ceiling, where a hulking silhouette pressed against the stone above, shifting its bulk like a spider weaving strands. Its eyes were two holes through which he could see the night sky, and behind it, more lurking shapes pressed tight against the rock. He understood then. The lighthouse had never kept light. It had kept them in. The keeper had let something in, and the sea had claimed him in return. A cold hand seized his ankle. He kicked out, breaking free, and scrambled toward the narrow tunnel behind him. The drowners clawed at his heels. Their wet voices moaned, "Renner, stay forever." He lunged into the passage and climbed, scrambling upward until he burst through the trapdoor into the lantern room. The girl crouched beside the music box, now glowing faintly. She opened it, and the waltz wound up one last time. Alex tore it free and hurled it into the storm-lashed night. The tinkling stopped. The candle guttered out. Above, the wind caught the music box and swept it into the black ocean. The girl turned to him, her face torn with relief, and in that instant looked 70 years old, eyes empty. Then she collapsed into dust that sifted through his fingers and drifted out through the broken lantern panes. The hatch creaked. Alex hauled himself up onto the platform as lightning cracked the sky. He tumbled onto the cliff, shaking rain from his coat. When he looked back, the lighthouse was silent and dark. No faint glow, no trapdoor. Only the steady beam from the working beacon on the new tower at Greyhaven's harbor, sweeping the sea and keeping the water at bay. In his pocket, Alex found a scrap of brass, an old music box crank etched with the name Hammond. He pocketed it, heart thundering, and never once looked back at the cliff's edge as he fled through the storm.
Story number 9.
Amelia Ross tightened her grip on the leather strap of her portfolio as she climbed the gravel drive to Harrow Manor. The afternoon sun lay low behind rolling pines, and the great stone house looked like a dark, slumbering beast. Amelia's heart thudded with excitement, and something else, a quiet unease she couldn't shake. This commission was the opportunity of a lifetime, to paint Gregory Harrow's portrait for the Town Gallery's centenary exhibit. She reminded herself to breathe. Inside, the foyer smelled of old wood polish and a hint of must. Gregory Harrow stood waiting in a high-backed chair framed by a colossal fireplace. His thin white hair was slicked back, and his pale blue eyes studied her without blinking. "Miss Ross," he said softly, "welcome." His voice was polite, but the silence stretched until Amelia felt compelled to speak. "Thank you for having me, Mr. Harrow." He inclined his head and gestured toward the great hall. "Follow me." As they passed through corridors hung with outdated landscapes and rain-streaked windows, Amelia's gaze kept returning to a large blank canvas on an easel under a sheet of burgundy velvet. In the corner, a black-clad caretaker polished the floorboards with slow, meticulous strokes. He met her eyes without smiling. Her first sitting began in the library. As she sketched Mr. Harrow's features, she noticed tiny drips of paint on the wood slats beside her, though she hadn't moved her brush. When she looked down, the drops were gone. She chalked it up to a draft, kicking up stray droplets from her tray. That night, she slept in the guest wing. Around midnight, a faint scratching woke her. It came from the library. She slipped into the corridor, slippered feet soundless on the Persian rug. The door stood ajar, and inside the canvas lay bare of its sheet. The faint glow of moonlight revealed a pinprick of pink on the white linen. Her first brushstroke, though she'd covered her palette before bed. A whisper brushed her ear. "Finish it." She bolted back to her room. By the third day, Amelia felt watched. Mirrors in the halls reflected fleeting shadows behind her. Portrait sessions grew tense. Mr. Harrow would lean forward and whisper, "Show me truth," before turning away abruptly. She tried to capture not just his face, but something darker, an ancient wariness. That evening, she stayed late to correct shading. The caretaker hovered at the library door. Without looking up, he said, "They say the painting chooses its painter." Amelia frowned. "I choose how it looks." He smiled. His lips parted too wide. "We'll see." As Amelia brushed the final highlights in the lantern-lit library, the candle flame guttered. The portrait's eyes glowed with uncanny life. She yanked off her smock and dropped it to the floor. A gust of wind slammed the shutters. On the easel, the painted eyes tracked her. The mouth curved into a slow grin that wasn't on the man she'd posed. She backed away, knocking over her stool. Down the hall, she found Mr. Harrow standing under a portrait of the original Harrow patriarch. "You've done well," he said softly. "You see why we needed a new artist. The family's legacy must live on." Amelia's voice trembled. The eyes, the smile. "It's not him." He reached out, pale fingers brushing her arm. "It is, and more. It's you." She yanked free. "What are you saying?" He sighed. "In every generation, one is chosen to join the canvas." Behind her, the caretaker's footsteps clicked closer. Amelia spun and fled down the corridor, heart hammering. Doors loomed on either side. She tried one. It was locked. The next. Locked. Whispers billowed through the walls. "Stay. Forever." She pounded the last door and it creaked open onto the gallery room. The sheet over her painting had been removed. A hush. Mr. Harrow and the caretaker stood before a small audience of townspeople, their faces shadowed by torchlight. Amelia's breath caught as she pulled the cloth away. The canvas didn't show Gregory Harrow. Instead, her own likeness stood before them, skin pale, eyes glinting with terror. Beneath it, carved into wet paint, a new signature, Amelia Ross. She staggered back. "No," she screamed. The caretaker smiled and tilted his head. "It's time." Hands seized her arms. She kicked and screamed, but the light narrowed to a pinprick as they forced her toward the canvas. Days later, children whispered about the new portrait in the gallery, saying her eyes seemed alive, following them, crying out in silent torment. And in the old library of Harrow Manor, under the pale moonlight, the painting of Gregory Harrow stood empty once more, save for a whisper on the wind. Next.
Story number 10.
The wind was already whipping across Blackwater Lake when Nora pressed her forehead to the frosted window of the rental car. She and her brother, Gabe, had driven half the night from Seattle so she could calm her nerves before her job interview. The cabin on the spit of land, jutted into the lake, looked cozy in the photos. Cherrywood walls, plaid curtains, a stacked stone fireplace. Now it stared back at them, dark and still, like a beast that knew they weren't welcome. They unloaded their bags as a lone bulb over the porch gutter swung free, clinking against the clapboard. Gabe tried it, but the nail fell out. "Come on," he said with a nervous laugh. "It's rustic. Think of it as character." Inside, the air smelled of lake rot and old pine. Nora's phone showed 0 bars. Gabe's fumbled for a signal. She ran cold fingers over the mantel's photo frame. Empty, glass cracked. "Strange," she murmured. Even the owner didn't mention missing photos. He flipped on the lights. Every lamp sparked and died. Only the fireplace fanned a dim glow. "I'll get the fire started," Gabe said. He grabbed kindling from the supply closet, but when he pulled it open, dozens of blackened photographs slipped to the floor. Images of families on the same porch, same pose, same cabin. In each, the faces were blurred into smudges. He bent to pick them up. Nora gasped. In the last photo, she and Gabe sat smiling, her arm around his shoulder, both staring at the camera, except that photo had been taken just 10 minutes ago. Gabe froze. No way. He flicked on his phone's flashlight and snapped a picture. The flash revealed something behind them in the frame, a tall silhouette at the window, watching. They spun around. Nothing. The front door rattled. Footsteps crunched on gravel. Gabe locked the door, his breath fogging. "It's probably the caretaker," he said. "He said he'd drop by." Nora's phone buzzed. One bar. A single text. "Don't stay." The sender ID was her own number. She yanked the phone up, scrolling through sent messages. None matched. "Gabe, she swallowed. "I got a text from me." Before he could answer, a soft knock tapped at the front window. In the pale porch light, a face pressed against the glass. A woman's mouth open in a scream, eyes black hollows. Nora yelped. Gabe yanked her back as the window glass cracked in spiderwebs. They fled through the kitchen door into the yard. The wind lashed at them, carrying a faint echo. Nora's voice calling, "Help me!" She spun. On the spit of land beyond the cabin, hundreds of figures lined the tree line. Everyone who had ever stayed here, garbed in night clothes, head tilted at the same angle, frozen in perpetual watch. Gabe grabbed her arm. "Run!" They sprinted toward the road, but the gravel trap curved in circles, leading always back to the cabin, which now lit up from within, each pane revealing that same haggard watcher. Panting, Nora realized their car sat empty, doors open, but the engine light danced on and off. Inside lay their keys. Gabe flung him to the driver's seat and slammed the door. Nora leapt in beside him. He turned the key. Nothing. A tapping on the windshield made them scream. In the passenger window, the woman's face appeared again, pressing closer this time. Nora slammed her hand against the horn. It wailed, but the face stayed, as if the sound did not touch her. Gabe shifted into reverse and floored the gas. The car lurched backwards, smashing into a rotted signpost. The horn stilled. He tried again. The engine caught, then died. Outside, the figures advanced through the trees, stepping into the yard in perfect unison. Nora climbed on his lap and cranked the wheel, fishtailing them through the mud toward the road. Headlights glared on the nearest figure, a man in a flannel shirt, pale as driftwood. Nora's heart thudded. He tilted his head until his ear met the door, and spoke. "It's too late." Gabe jammed the wheel left. The car skidded off the spit, tires churning shallow water. They waded out, chest deep toward the opposite bank. Under moonlight, the cabin behind them sank into darkness. No lights, no windows, just a silhouette disappearing into the mist. They collapsed on the shore, soaked and shivering. Gabe's phone buzzed again. Nora stared at the screen. "Why did you come back?" She looked down at her reflection in the water and saw her own face, twisted in a silent scream, staring up from dozens of rippling photographs strewn across the lake bed.